3 years now. Partners include LISC Duluth, LISC Twin Cities, the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation, the Department of Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation, Department of Employment and Economic Development, and the Southwest Initiative Foundation. So thank you to all of them for their support throughout this journey we've been on with Opportunity Zones. As I mentioned, there are three main areas of focus for the Opportunity Collaborative. The first is creating a space for statewide collaboration, focusing on the potential benefits of Opportunity Zones and educating people about them. And this year, that has really taken the form of these webinars, which have been going on every other month. That means we're down to our second to last one of the year. We have one more scheduled for 2020, and that'll be on December 15th. And look for more details on that one in the near future. You can see our full schedule, including the recordings of the past events, on our website at binopco.com/events. Second piece of Binopco that we'd like to highlight is our educational efforts. When we first got off the ground, this has involved a lot of training sessions in communities across the state. This year, it's been pretty much all virtual, but we've still been able to have some events tailored to specific communities. I've been able to do a deep dive in those areas, bringing along some of our experts and things like accounting and legal details of how to make Opportunity Zones work. And so that opportunity remains out there for other communities who may be interested. And final piece is the directory, where we have our listings of currently over 60 projects and sites seeking Opportunity Zone investment across the state of Minnesota. That directory is available on our website at binopco.com/directory. We have 3 types of projects that we add to that directory. They include traditional real estate developments, operating businesses, which of course can receive Opportunity Zone investment, and finally, available properties that are located in zones that could benefit from that investment. And through that directory, we really tried to tell the story of both the project and the community and build that case so that the developer and the community have that piece that they can go there to show to potential investors and try to attract that investment. And everything that we have listed on the Binopco directory is also listed nationally through our partners at the Opportunity Exchange, which has driven some significant traffic to some of the projects in the state. So with that, toward our federal resources panel, and we have our 4 panelists today who will, I think, give us a great overview of some of the resources that are available, some of the other things that are out there that people can use to augment Opportunity Zone projects, maybe building up a capital stack or just understanding other resources that might be available as you go through with this. So I'll introduce each of them as we go, but our first guest speaker will be Jake Akervik. He is an analyst in community initiatives with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, based in the Minneapolis Office of Field Policy and Management. In addition to leading HUD Midwest Region Opportunity Zone efforts, he also serves as the federal liaison to the North Minneapolis Promise Zone Initiative. He spent the past 5 years helping federal, tribal, and local partners and stakeholders across the country, state, and Twin Cities Metro build place-based and collective impact efforts around a range of issues. Built an AA from Minneapolis College, a BS from the University of Minnesota, and an MS from the University of Denver. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jake.
Hey, Carl, thank you. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Awesome. Can you see the slides too?
Yeah.
Great. Again, thanks for the intro, Carl. Appreciate it. My name is Jake Akervik. I work for HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, out of the Minneapolis field office, which is normally located in downtown Minneapolis, but now is dispersed throughout the Twin Cities metro area because we're all working from home like a lot of folks out there. So I think we've had a long-standing relationship with Binopco and Northspan because HUD is one of the lead agencies on the federal Opportunity Zones initiative in terms of education outreach and other related items. And so what I'm going to try and do is a little bit of table setting for my colleagues to follow and give you kind of the broad overview of some of the federal resources. And then my folks from HUD Community Planning and Development, CPD, Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration, and U.S. Small Business Administration will go ahead and fill in some gaps with their respective agencies and programs. So before we get started, just to let you know, this is not an intro. It's not a 101 for OZs or whatever. I assume that most folks at this point know the 101, and if you don't, there's a lot of resources out there to help with that, including one in particular and some others that I'll point out on the opportunityzones.gov website. And so again, this is designed just to provide a high-level overview so you can take some of this information, use it for yourself, bring it back to your organization, share it with community, local partners, whatever you want to do with it that might be helpful. And just to let you know, the reason we're here is because we're available after this webinar to help fill in gaps, to help do more research or whatever you need. So if there's something you hear that you want to know more about, if there's something you don't hear, circle back with us, and we'll definitely be able to see if there's information we can help you find. And then why should I care about this presentation? And again, part of the goal here is to share information with these community orgs, partners, stakeholders that we all have around the state. We also know that both urban and rural communities right now are looking for additional funding and resources, especially in relation to COVID recovery, and some of the Opportunity Zone benefits might help with that, especially in terms of federal grants, and we'll get to that in a minute. And that's kind of circles back to point 3. There are some incentives, and we'll talk about those. So the way I kind of think about, I've been working on Opportunity Zones now maybe a little bit longer than some folks have, because as Carl mentioned in my intro, I'm the federal liaison to the North Minneapolis Promise Zone Initiative. There are 14 urban promise zones across the country, and the Opportunity Zones were one of these tax incentives that was actually discussed. It's been in germination for many years, and it was something that was discussed when the Promise Zones came around initially, going on 5-6 years ago. And so it's an idea that's been a long time coming. And so now that it's here, we're really trying to support it through the work that we're doing. And so I think about there being 4 main federal resources: opportunityzones.gov website, grants.gov website, federalregister.gov website, and then agency-specific resources. And that'll be some of the stuff that my colleagues will get more into. But it's also, again, the type of thing that we can help you research, because it's more than just our 3 agencies that have some of these incentives and other things related to Opportunity Zones. I also want to point out the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council was set up and was tasked with really pulling together the cabinet level and other agencies to coordinate these efforts around these federal incentives and trying to align federal programs with Opportunity Zones. And so there's a lot of information out there. Again, too much to cover in this presentation. But I'm going to give you some resources that you can search and look for some of this stuff on your own as well. And that will lead us to some additional discussions, hopefully, in the future. So the way I align this presentation, at least when it comes to opportunityzones.gov, you'll see it says section, the council. And so if you go to opportunityzones.gov and you look at the horizontal navigation, you'll see that some of these sections I'm highlighting are in that navigation. And what I'm trying to do right now is just point out some of the things in those sections that might be useful to know as you start to try and navigate some of these resources. So one thing to point out, again, that most of the cabinet level agencies, I don't think DOD's in there, but you can see it's broad federal representation on the Opportunity Revitalization Council. And that's because we know that Opportunity Zones are not just about economic development. Housing, health, workforce, all those things are related to Opportunity Zones. And that's kind of what these collective impact, place-based, holistic models look like. And that's why they've been working with these different agencies and different partners across the country to try and make sure that each agency is bringing something to the table to maximize the impact of the Opportunity Zones. On that council webpage, a few of the best practices that I would highlight. See if I can move this box out of the way on my screen so it's not covering up that sidebar. There's a best practices report that I think is pretty good. I believe that was published in May 2020, so it's relatively recent, but it's one of many. That's one of the federal guides, and there's some non-federal guidance out there as well that you can find from various organizations. But there's a slew of really good best practices stuff out there. There's also a Council of Economic Advisors report that I would suggest you take a look at. And then there's another list that I think is really critical, especially when we look forward, and that's the completed action items. And what that shows is there's something going on, like, I didn't look at the count, but it's something like 200 actions that have been completed by these federal agencies that are part of the council. And a lot of those are the federal grant preference, but some of them are other regulatory and related actions. And so right now, that's a little bit more of a look back. It gets updated on a regular basis, but it's a really good idea to look at it because I think it also tends to kind of give us an idea of what might occur in the future in terms of some of this grant preference and other types of activities. So it's good to familiarize yourself with that within whatever topics you cover in your work so you can see what might align with the work that you and your community partners are doing. This is the page for investors, and this is just, again, a sampling of what you can find on that piece of the website. I think there is a good little blurb on establishing a QOF, or Qualified Opportunity Fund. And so, you know, a lot of this information, again, is stuff you might have, know something about each one of these or all of these. But this is also a good place to be able to send people, again, send your partners and stakeholders so you don't have to try and pull together all the information on some of these different topics. And there's also some useful stuff, like getting back to the relevant tax forms, getting a direct link to the final rules, SEC guidance or Securities and Exchange Commission guidance. That's something I didn't even really know was out there because I'm not in that domain, but it's interesting stuff to know that's available. And that's the kind of stuff that your investors, your capital gains investors are really looking at. And so even if you're not an expert, it's probably good to have a little bit of familiarity with what's out there so you can point people in the right direction. On the section of the website called Local Leaders, there are a couple things I would highlight, and one is these drop downs here. And again, if you crack those open, there's a little plus sign on the website. It opens up, again, that kind of list of completed actions and other programs that are being aligned along these Opportunity Revitalization Council work streams, which, and I'm trying to remember if this is all the work streams, but this is definitely the 4 primary work streams: economic development, education and workforce, entrepreneurship, safe neighborhoods. And so that's another good place to go and kind of take a look at what the federal government has been doing in terms of actions around funding and other regulatory issues. And then I would highlight, again, a really good resource there's been 2 volumes of this put together. One of them, one of my colleagues out in California has been heavily involved in putting this together. And I think he and others who have been involved have done a really great job on these community toolkits. And so there's a volume 2 of that toolkits that's available. And that can go along with those best practices reports and really give you some ideas for how to reach out to communities and give you some ideas about what other communities across the country, along with the best practices guide, have been doing to try and engage more around opportunity zones. This is kind of a sample of the resources section of the website, and you can see that long list to the left there. And there's too much really to cover there. But that's where a lot of just, hey, if it's a good resource, it gets dropped in that bucket. And I think it's worth knowing that there's a lot of good stuff there. One of the things I would highlight is that there is this little video here, and I just found this not too long ago. I'll be honest with you, I don't know what all's out there either because I can't catch all of it. But there's an How Do Opportunity Zones Work video that's posted on YouTube by the website here, and I think it's a really good. It's like a 2 or 3 minute little primer that tends to speak more to the layman about what it looks like and what it's trying to do. And so I thought it was a neat little video. And then again, a whole bevy of some really interesting resources there. And this is just a slice of the resources that are out there. Obviously, they're catching a lot of the stuff on the federal side, and there's still stuff that could be posted there. So there's more out there on some of the agency specific websites, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that's, again, some of what we'll get into, a little slice of that with our partner agencies here in a minute. I just wanted to highlight this too on the resources section. And this is something all of us have seen: a map of the opportunity zones. There's been various organizations that have put these maps together. DEED, the state agency has one, I believe, and that's all. These are good resources, but I just want to let everyone know that there is a map also on the Opportunity Zones website in this resources section. So the left graphic was just to show how broad this was, and it was funny because I cracked it open today, and then I actually scrolled back past the lower 48, and I'm going, geez, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on up in Alaska and the Aleutians and all that, and that was pretty interesting. I wasn't aware of that, I'll be honest with you. That I guess I assume that there was some stuff going on in Alaska, but you don't usually zoom the map out that far. So I thought that was kind of cool. But if you zoom in, there is a little box there, and that's one of the things I think is cool. I go to this website quite often, and what I do is drop a city or a state or an address in there. So if someone tells me, hey, is my thing in an opportunity zone, or am I near an opportunity zone, go pop it in there. It'll drop a marker on the map, and then you can definitively say, like, yeah, this is an opportunity zone. No, it isn't, or if it's near an opportunity zone. And that's also relevant for organizations like nonprofits that serve communities. It doesn't necessarily always have to be in an opportunity zone, but near opportunity zones as well. Real quick, and I know a lot of people know about grants.gov, but I just want to point out that we at HUD, we worked with the grants.gov team to add an opportunity zone benefits flag to the category search function. And so it's been a little bit of that was the first part. The technical part was getting that as an option. And then the second part has been getting the agencies to actually flag those. And so since the federal agency is a large entity, we're still working to make sure that our federal partners get those opportunity zone benefits grants flagged. And so that's one way to search. But if you want to catch all of them, you got to not only look at that, you have to search for opportunity zone inside the funding announcement documents, the Word or the PDF or whatever they post. I usually just Control F and I search literally for opportunity or zone or opportunity zone, some combo thereof. And that'll get you down to the section where you can see, hey, are they offering some type of preference points, or are they encouraging opportunity zone organizations that are either in an opportunity zone or serving an opportunity zone to apply for these funding opportunities. And so that's one way you can kind of start to drill down and say, hey, I can go pull some of these out, and I can go to my community partners or my own org, and I can say, hey, this is something that we can apply with some potential preference or priority. And just grants.gov best practices, this is something I talk a fair amount about it in a lot of different presentations that I give, and a lot of discussions I have with community partners. But grants.gov, there's, to me, there's best practices with looking for this stuff. And you really should, if you have the capacity, and I know that's not always easy, you should have someone in your organization who's really assigned to look for grants on a daily or weekly basis. You got to create an account, you got to go search for them, you got to save those searches. And then once you have all that together, you can actually just get daily or weekly email notifications. And I personally get a daily notification. I usually scan that every day or at least a few times a week, depending on how busy I am. And then I reach out to partners that I know are looking for specific types of funding for whatever efforts they've got going on. Again, this is just an illustration of the 28 that are flagged. This is part of that list. And so you can see, as of today, there's 28 in there that are flagged up like that. So it's worth taking a look at those again and beyond, and making sure that you're aware that there's stuff going on in the NOFO. How much time do I got left, Carl? Was 5 minutes 5 minutes ago, or is it 5 minutes right now? That's cool. I'm just making sure. I see this flashing light, and I think maybe I'm destroying our agenda here. So let's see. The last one I'll throw out is federalregister.gov, and this is applicable for more than opportunity zones. But one thing I would mention is, all the federal funding announcements and things where they're asking for feedback on rules and regs and policy and all this other stuff goes into federalregister.gov. And so this is another thing you can consider searching, because sometimes it'll get you ahead of the curve. It'll give you an opportunity to sometimes feedback on proposed rules or regs around opportunity zones or a whole bevy of other topics. So I think that's worth keeping in mind. So that's where I'm going to stop. I think I was trying to hit 10 to 15 minutes. I think I'm in that window. If you have questions now, I'm happy to field them. If not, you got my contact info. I was going to use my old kind of like with a haircut standing in front of the American flag headshot that most federal employees use, or a lot of us do. And I just realized no one's going to recognize me anymore after this is all over, because I've committed to no haircuts until the vaccine arrives. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully early next year. But again, questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm around. I'm reachable. Thanks for your time. I appreciate you joining the webinar.
All right, thanks, Jake. Does anyone have any immediate questions for Jake that they want to verbalize? All right, hearing none, you can move on. Feel free to chat them or follow up later if you would like. Our next speaker will be Joey Baietti. He's been with HUD for the past 5 years, started in the climate resilience as a climate resilience specialist in the Environmental and Justice Strategy Department. Currently works for the Financial Management Division as a loan officer for HUD with the Section 108 Loan Guarantee Program, which provides financing for states and local governments for community and economic development projects. Before coming to HUD, Joey was a Peace Corps volunteer with Kingdom of Tonga, is currently attending NYU's Wagner Graduate School of Public Service and pursuing a Master of Urban Planning. And so Joy will give us an overview of some HUD tools that can plug in with Opportunity Zones.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. I just have to share my screen, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
You should be able to.
Okay, I think I got it.
Yep, proceed.
Perfect. Is that looking good?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. For some reason, it's at the. Now let's try it. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Carl. I'm Joey Baietti. Like Carl said, I work in the Financial Management Division at HUD headquarters. We are in charge of managing the Section 108 Loan Guarantee Program. I am a little bit flustered. I didn't realize I was going to be on camera, so I went to run and grab the only colored shirt I have here. So it's a little festive. Sorry, everyone. Let's see, is there a way for me to see, like by way of thumbs up, how many of you are familiar with the Section 108 program at HUD? Section 108 or CDBG? Do y'all know where the thumbs up is? I think it's like it's in the participants category of Zoom. Perfect, okay. So one of you at least, nice. Okay, well, then this will be all new information, which I guess is great. I will hopefully be able to present the information clearly, and if you have any questions along the way, I'll be happy to answer them. So I'm going to go through the Section 108 basics. I'm going to talk a little bit about using Section 108 and CDBG in opportunity zones, and then I'll go through a couple of project examples. So first off, Section 108, it's a loan guarantee program, so it provides loan guarantees, not grants, so the money does have to be paid back, and we'll get to the repayment terms and things like that later on in the presentation. It uses the same framework as the Community Development Block Grant Program, which I'm assuming you all are somewhat familiar with. Can I get a thumbs up again if you all know CDBG? Okay, at least one of you, that's good. Okay, a couple of you, perfect. Okay, so by using the same framework as CDBG, it means eligible activities, national objectives, and if applicable, public benefit standards. So there are a host of eligible activities that meet the program requirements, and then the program has to meet the activity has to meet one of three national objectives. And then depending on what the eligible activity is, it may trigger the public benefit standards, which we'll talk a little bit about later on in the presentation. So the best part about Section 108 is it offers our recipients a means of accessing the capital markets at a low cost. So why is Section 108 a great financing tool? There's a wide range of uses. Like I said, there's a bunch of eligible activities. It's low cost financing that's available on a flexible basis. So there's no application deadlines or anything like that. We accept, by we, I mean HUD accepts various sources of repayment and collateral. And as I mentioned, the availability of funds is on a rolling basis. So those who have access to Section 108 are the same as the HUD CDBG entitlement grantees and states. So that's the entitlement grantees are cities over 50,000 or counties over 200,000 in population, and then smaller units of general local government through the states. But subrecipient entities like economic development organization, housing authorities, nonprofits, they play a big role in Section 108 and CDBG programs because they are helpful in designing and implementing the program on behalf of the grantees. They also may receive funding directly if they become a designated public agency of the city. So as I mentioned, using Section 108 or CDBG does have to be an eligible activity, and there's a couple different categories of eligible activities. Here are the kind of broad categories. So there's economic development, housing, public facilities and improvements, and then these last two categories, public services, planning and admin, those are only eligible with CDBG. So Section 108 is the physical development component, if you want to think about it that way, of CDBG. Here is just a overview of the types of projects that might fall into these categories. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but just to get you thinking of the types of projects that you can fund with CDBG in Section 108. There's also this other category that is not here, but if we're thinking about COVID-19 response and recovery, temporary housing shelters and provision of other services is also a good thing to think about when thinking about these types of funding. This slide is just to show you how Section 108 and CDBG can be used at every stage of the development process. So you have your pre-development costs like site prep, going into your implementation. Working capital is a big one for opportunity zones. And then also this ensuring outcomes category, when you partner Section 108 with CDBG, you can really do a lot of other services to support your development. So job training is a big one, and other public services. So there are two ways of approaching the Section 108 program. There's the project-specific way, and then there's through a loan fund. So a project-specific application, I guess, and way of utilizing Section 108 is going to require a really detailed underwriting process by HUD headquarters. So we're going to look for a lot of information about the project. We're going to look at the project's financials, and we're going to try and underwrite the project so that we are sure that the project doesn't present an undue risk on the city or the federal government. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the funding process. So the flow of funds with Section 108. This flow of funds is particular to project-specific applications, not always, but we tend to see this way of the flow of funds when the borrower is the one who's also, the city is the borrower who is also the developer or the one who's managing the project. So we start here with when the city applies to HUD for a Section 108 loan guarantee and they are approved, then they become a borrower and then they enter the financing process. So here you see the first stage of the financing process is drafting the contract and all the other remaining loan documents. Then there's a pass back between HUD and the borrower for any edits or any changes that need to be made to the contract before it's finalized. Once it's finalized, the loan documents are signed and the collateral documentation is finalized. Then HUD works on the back end with a lender. So unlike some other federal programs, HUD actually works with the lender directly. And so the city borrower doesn't have to go out and find a separate lender that does Section 108 loans. So HUD will work with the lender. We supply the lender with the note and the guarantee and the other loan documentation. And then the lender will loan the funds directly to the borrower, in this case, the city, and then the city repays the lender directly. So as you can see, none of the actual financing is coming from HUD. It's actually coming from the capital markets directly. The other way of approaching Section 108 is through a loan fund. And so this is ideal if you have a pipeline of projects that you want to fund, or it could be particularly ideal for an opportunity zone where you want to target investment in a specific geographic area. So applications for Section 108 loan funds, they don't necessarily have to describe the specific projects that you have in mind. They just have to describe the types of activities that you are considering funding with the Section 108 loan. And this way of using the program kind of streamlines the HUD processing of the application, because we don't necessarily have to do a strict underwriting of each individual project. What we do is we look at the underwriting guidelines of the city and we approve those underwriting guidelines that are going to be used to going to be used to evaluate every project in the loan fund. So this flow of funds is typically what we see when there is a loan fund, when the city re-lends the funds to a third-party business or developer. So similar process where we start with drafting the loan documents, going through the editing process, finalizing and executing all the loan documents. HUD then, as with the last flow, works directly with the lender. The lender will then loan the funds to the city, or the borrower in this case, and then the city will re-lend the funds to a third-party business or developer. And then that business will repay the funds directly to the city, and then the city will repay the fiscal agent. So before I move on, are there any questions as of right now about Section 108 in general, or about the process, maybe in terms of applying or anything like that? Is everybody clear about the process? Does the funding actually come from HUD? Maybe is a good gut check question. How's everybody feel about that? Is there like a thumbs up, thumbs down if people feeling like good? Okay, so by thumbs up, I hope you mean yes, you are understanding the process, or thumbs up, you mean, yeah, understanding the process. Okay, great. So as I'm going through this, it's good to try and think about different projects that you may consider for Section 108 funding, and then we can talk a little bit about whether those projects would be ideal for Section 108 or CDBG, particularly if those projects are in opportunity zones. So I'll move on then, but please stop me or write a question into the chat if I'm going too fast. But the financing cost of Section 108, which is, I'm sure, what you're all wondering, there are two ways of receiving financing under Section 108. There is our interim rate financing and then our permanent rate financing. So our interim rate financing is based off of the 3-month LIBOR rate plus 20 basis points. I just looked at LIBOR. It was 0.23, I believe. So right now the cost would be around 0.43%. And then our permanent rate financing isn't available all the time. It's actually available only about once every 3 years when HUD goes through its public offering period. But that's when we can offer competitive fixed interest rates. We go through, like I said, the public offering about once every 3 years, and we went through our last public offering in 2019, but given COVID and everything, I would say we wouldn't be going through our next public offering until around 2021 or 22. So before we talk about Section 108 and CDBG in opportunity zones, do people have other questions about Section 108? Are people feeling like they understand the process? I left out 2 maybe big things that you all would want to know about Section 108. So I'm wondering if you all are going to bring that up or if I should just bring it up. I'm looking at the participants. It's like talking into black boxes here. Okay, well, you all may want to know what the loan term is. So Section 108 loan term is up to 20 years. And we do, again, by we, I mean HUD, does accept periods of interest only payments. So if you wanted to do a couple years interest only so that the project can achieve lease up, we do accept that type of repayment structure. The other thing that I left out that you may want to know is the acceptable forms of repayment and additional collateral. I'm assuming by not asking that question, you all were just wondering it and hoping I would bring it up. So you were right, I'm doing it now for you. So HUD does require 2 forms of collateral with Section 108 loans. So the first form of collateral to get access to the program is actually the city's or the entitlement community's pledge of their current and future CDBG allocation. So what that means is it's not like the city pledges all the money back to HUD and then doesn't receive it, or it goes through some different process of receiving those funds. The entitlement community will receive the funds just like they normally do every year, but the pledge of the funds to the secretary for a Section 108 loan, what that means is if the city were to ever miss a payment, or say there was a change in their financing team and they just forgot to make the payment, HUD would have the authority to go into the entitlement community's line of credit and take out that year's debt service. So if the community was like, oh, we didn't mean it, and our finance director is back on track, then they can pay the Section 108 debt service and then refund their CDBG allocation. So it's not as scary as people tend to think, but that's just something that you all should be aware of. And then HUD actually does require a secondary piece of collateral because CDBG is appropriated, and it's not guaranteed that Congress is going to appropriate CDBG every year or appropriate CDBG to the same amount every year. So HUD does require an additional form of collateral. That could be, we accept a wide variety of forms of collateral. Typically, if the project involves real property, then HUD does receive a lien on the real property or some position on lien on the real property. So HUD does accept a subordinated position. But we also accept TIF revenue, parking revenue, a wide variety of other sources of collateral. And similarly to the collateral, HUD does also accept many forms of repayment. So some cities decide to use their CDBG allocation. That's an acceptable form of repayment. Preferably, we like to see repayment coming from project revenue so that the city is truly leveraging their CDBG dollars to the best of what the program can offer. But we also accept, like I said, parking revenue could be a form of repayment, TIF revenue as well. So we would work closely with the borrower to identify a source of collateral and then also make sure that the repayment source is going to be acceptable to HUD. So how's everybody doing? Who knows? I'm gonna ask a question. What is the maximum loan term for Section 108? Does somebody want to be brave enough to unmute themselves and yell out that answer? No one, huh?
Got a couple of people in the chat box responding.
Okay, yeah, were they correct responses?
Yes, 20 years.
Yep, that's correct. Awesome. Okay, and one more question. This is gonna be a throwback, so I may stump you here. Does the community who's applying for Section 108 receive the money from HUD or from the bank? Is this? Feel free to unmute or throw it into the chat.
Someone in the chat saying bank.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay, great. You are listening. I just needed to know. I get a little nervous sometimes, Okay, so we will talk a little bit about how HUD envisions utilizing CDBG in Section 108 in opportunity zones. So there's kind of three main ways of utilizing CDBG and Section 108 in an opportunity zone, and they're not always going directly into the project. So one way could be thinking about it as a way to attract opportunity zone investment. CDBG in Section 108 could be a good source of financing to prepare sites for opportunity zone investment. So as I talked about in that slide, showing you the stages of when CDBG in Section 108 can be used in a development project, one of those was site prep. So what we see a lot with Section 108 is utilizing the funds to maybe do demolition, acquisition, or install the public facilities on the projects, water, sewer, things like that, to create the site so it's pad ready for opportunity zone investment. As I'm sure all of you know, OZ investors are going to want to do a quick turnaround on their funds. They're not going to be looking for a project where they're going to have to spend a lot of time preparing that project. They want to kind of throw their money into a project that's pretty well prepared. So thinking about ways that you can use your HUD funds to get those sites ready for vertical development pretty quickly would be a good way to utilize HUD funds. The other way is as a resource to supplement opportunity zone equity. So this is kind of probably how a lot of people initially think about utilizing federal funds, going directly into an opportunity zone project. So what's great about Section 108 is, and CDBG for that matter, is that these funds can be used to provide the necessary gap financing in projects. It's thought that OZ equity is at most going to be about 30% of project costs. So there's going to be a lot of other sources of financing that are going to go into these projects. And thinking about CDBG in Section 108 is a good way of not only providing that necessary gap financing, but also providing some public benefits that are going to be required by the project. So as you all know, opportunity zones is a tax incentive. It's not really a program, so it doesn't really come with program requirements that are going to achieve some sort of public outcome. So by adding Section 108 and CDBG into the project, you're showing the investors that the city has skin in the game, and then also that you're requiring some sort of public outcome to come out of the project. So thinking about utilizing the resources in that way is a good source as well. And then also as a resource to complement opportunity zone projects. So one of the ways of thinking about CDBG in Section 108 is looking at your opportunity zone, looking at the types of investment that are going into that community, and then thinking about ways that you could complement those investments. So one of the examples I always use is, say opportunity zones is going into a large multifamily development. Maybe you think about helping a local business grow into some sort of building that is right around that multi-family development to provide services to all those new residents that are going to come into the area. So thinking about different projects like that and ways that you can make sure that you're looking holistically at the opportunity zone and not just focusing on the individual projects. And utilizing Section 108 and CDBG are a good way to have those resources available to help out the community and the surrounding residents so that they benefit from opportunity zone projects as well. Are there any questions before I move on to the project examples? Is this like new information? Everybody feeling good about it? Yeah.
We got a quick question for you. So just to talk quickly about collateral here, it sounds like, there's a lot of different funding sources that a particular borrower may need that may require collateral. And you mentioned that you need two forms of collateral for the Section 108 funding. Is there, do they require firsts on that, or how does that piece work?
Yeah, so it is two forms of a collateral, but remember the first form is the pledge of a current and future CDBG allocation. So if you think of that kind of almost like it's a separate thing, almost like the initial hurdle to get access to the program. And then you really think about there's one kind of major source of collateral that is normally collateral associated with this specific project. And so if you are thinking about offering some sort of lien on real property, then HUD can accept a subordinated position. But we do underwrite projects using a standard 80% loan to value ratio. So you would just want to make sure that there's enough collateral to cover both the first and second position.
Okay, beautiful, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Joey, it's Jake. Real quick, I'm just trying to remember, did you mention what the maximum amount they can borrow is?
I didn't. Thank you, Jake. I didn't. That was also a test. I was going to see if you guys asked that question. So
I'll be waiting for my check. My mailbox is empty.
Dang it. Yes, so that's a good question. So entitlement communities, including states, the maximum borrowing capacity is 5 times the annual CDBG allocation, their most recent annual CDBG allocation, not the CV, which is unique to this year. So it'd just be their typical FY20 grant. So it'd be 5 times that amount, less any outstanding loan commitments or loan balances. And that information can be found on our website for each entitlement community. We have a spreadsheet that kind of lists their most recent allocation, if they were or have ever been a Section 108 borrower, and then their maximum borrowing authority. And our Section 108 website is going to be on the last slide of this slide deck. So, so you could get that there. Oh yeah, so HUD also recently released a notice this summer on utilizing CPD funds in opportunity zones. So I've talked a little bit about CDBG and Section 108, but there's also a few other forms of CPD, community planning and development funds, that are available to communities. You all might be aware of home funds, which is probably the biggest one, also emergency solution grants. So taking a look at this notice will give you some ideas on how to utilize those types of fundings and the benefits of utilizing those funds in opportunity zones. One of the biggest ones for home is using the funds for rental rehab assistance, but then also utilizing the funds for home ownership assistance to help residents who maybe don't own their homes buy their homes, so that they will have, that they won't get pushed out of the area if investment does start to come into the area. Any questions? How am I doing on time? 5 minutes? Okay, great. So the first project I wanted to go over is a typical project for Section 108, and this is a mixed-use development project. This was a 14-acre brownfield remediation project in Rochester, New York. It was a mixed-use development that included residential, office, and retail, as well as parking and a grocery store. And this project created 330 full-time jobs and also provided benefits to the community through the grocery store. Here's just a snapshot of the sources and uses for the project. Here, this project used a lot of Section 108 financing, the $20 million. As you can see, it's still just a gap in the overall total cost for the project. But we've seen projects that maybe will use $2 million of Section 108 up to the biggest I've seen is 30 million. So really a wide range of financing option for Section 108. And here you can see the uses were construction hard costs, could also be used for developer fees and things like that. This is a project that utilized Section 108 and Opportunity Zone equity. So this is out of Atlantic City, Atlantic County. They started together, they utilized funds to start a business loan program. Here's just the general snapshot of the loan program. So it was small and micro loans to family-owned businesses. And Atlantic City, Atlantic County, they utilized the funds to redevelop a tourist area, a boardwalk in Atlantic City. So as you can see here, they revitalized a few buildings into a beer garden, coffee shop, yoga studio, and 2 restaurants. And this, as you can see, a little bit of the project sources, there's about almost 700,000 in OZ equity, and then 450,000 of Section 108 equity. Both went into this project. So that's an example. If you think about it, opportunity zones, the funding out of opportunity zones is going to look like equity in the financing stack. Section 108 is going to look like debt, oftentimes mezzanine debt. So it's really not too complicated to blend them together. That's just a thought. Here is my contact information, as well as the Section 108 website. So please feel free to reach out and let me know if you have any questions.
All right, thank you, Joey. Does anyone have any quick, immediate questions for Joey?
Assuming that's because I just did such a good job of explaining this program.
That's definitely it. But if by chance anyone should think of anything, again, feel free to chat him or use his contact information there. So with that, we will move on. Our next presenter is Carlann Unger with the Federal Economic Development Administration, or EDA. Carlann has been with the Chicago Regional Office, and as many of you probably know, Minnesota is within the Chicago region since December of 2019. As the region's economic development integrator, she coordinates with regional and federal partners to identify federal and state funding opportunities for local economic development projects. Prior to joining EDA, Carlann was an economist with the Department of Interior's Office of Policy Analysis and a statistician with the U.S. Census Bureau. She received her master's and bachelor's degrees in economics from New Mexico State University. So take it away, Carlann.
Great. No, thank you, Carl, for the introduction and for the opportunity to be here and present on this panel today. Full disclosure, I was kicked out of the Zoom meeting once. And so if all of a sudden I am gone, I will try to come back in as fast as possible. So at EDA, for some reason, we can't use Zoom. And so I have to go off our VPN. And so it's just a little wonky, but if I'm gone, I'll try to come back as soon as possible. But anyway, so I'm here today to present on, oh no, and my slides are actually frozen, so it's not letting me go through my slides. So Carl, you might have to bring them up and I might have to.
I will grab your.
This is what I was talking about. It's so wonky. Sorry about that.
Just a moment.
Hey, Carlann, it's Jake.
I think I got it to work.
Okay.
Great.
Never mind, you need no gap fill.
So anyway, so I'm going to be talking today about EDA's programs, and specifically I'm going to focus on how we support opportunity zones and investments to opportunity zones. So I wanted to start with just a little bit of background on EDA. So we're a really small agency within the Department of Commerce, and we've been around since 1965. And with our primary role being to support regional economic development by making grant investments in distressed communities to help catalyze job creation, attract private investment, promote innovation and entrepreneurship, and to accelerate long-term growth. And fun fact, we are actually the only agency where we focus exclusively on economic development. And so as you can see, you know, on the slide, our mission and our focus is very much aligned with supporting opportunity zones. And our purpose is almost identical to that of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, which Jake spoke about, and which DOC is actually a member on that council, which was formed to better coordinate federal economic development resources in opportunity zones. And so since the introduction of the zones under the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, EDA has actively engaged in supporting opportunity zones. And so here you can see on this slide, you know, we have 4 main areas and I'm going to cover today. The first is eligibility under special need. So opportunity zones are considered a special need, and you would have eligibility under that. Setting opportunity zones as an investment priority, offering strategic plan guidelines around opportunity zones for our CEDs, which I'll get into later, and also our economic development integration function. So I want to start by talking about our investment priorities. So through our competitive grant process, EDA evaluates all project applications to determine the extent to which they align with the priorities that you're seeing here on the screen. So we have recovery and resilience, critical infrastructure, workforce development and manufacturing, and exports and foreign direct investment. And then you have also the opportunity zones, which you can see there is new from 2000, was identified as a priority in 2019. I do want to note, however, that just because a project is in an opportunity zone, that does not automatically make it, you know, eligible or competitive for EDA funding in our programs. So EDA also evaluates how projects address, you know, like I was saying, how they align with our mission of creating those high quality jobs. And we'll also look at, you know, how the applicant documents, how you're going to leverage other resources, both on the public and the private side, and whether the applicant has the capacity to go through the scope of work and to catalyze that project and to finish that project. And so here are 3 of our most popular programs. So I'll start with the Economic Adjustment Assistance. So this is actually our most flexible program in that it can fund a variety of both construction and non-construction projects. So you see on the right-hand column, it has the uses. So it can be used for infrastructure projects, but it can also be used for strategies, so land feasibility studies and other feasibility studies. You can build incubators. Next, we have our public works, and so that's our oldest that's our oldest program. And as the name suggests, that is what we use to invest in those traditional public works projects. And again, the uses are over there on the column on the right. And the third is our planning assistance. And so this provides a wide range of both short-term and long-term planning efforts. And this is also where we fund the development of those comprehensive economic development strategies, those SEDS. And so now to talk about the distressed criteria. So normally for our public works and the economic adjustment assistance programs, an entity would have to, a project would have to be in an area where it meets either one of the first two bullets for the distress criteria. So the first is the per capita income of 80% or less of the national average. And the second is a high unemployment, so at least 1% greater than national average for the most recent 24-month period. And then we have the special needs, which I talked about a few slides ago, and that's where opportunities would fit in. So other examples of special needs would be a disaster, a presidentially declared disaster, so a tornado, a flood. Another would be a major plant closing or a nuclear power plant, and again, opportunity zones. So if a project is located in this area, they don't necessarily have to meet the eligibility of distress criteria. And if you want to see whether or not your region meets the distress criteria threshold, for example, if it's not in an opportunity zone, you can visit statsamerica.org. And you can just enter in your location and it'll bring up those estimates for the region. So now I want to pivot and talk about our partners and specifically our economic development districts. For those of you who are not aware, these are multi-jurisdictional entities that serve regional geographies. So they're usually a group of counties that have come together to form that district. And there is an EDA EDD designation process. And we do provide funding to develop, for the EDDs to develop the SEDS. And so the EDDs are usually the leaders of those locally based, regionally driven, comprehensive economic development strategies. And so more information on EDDs, or if you want to identify the EDD that covers your district or your area, there's that website at the bottom of the slide again. And I want to go into more detail about the SEDS. So the SEDS is a very important document because you actually have to have a SEDS in place before you can apply for EDA programs. But we do accept what we refer to as SEDS alternatives. So if you want to develop a county level or a city level SEDS alternative, we can accept that. Although we do have requirements. So that SEDS alternative has to be deemed by EDA as an acceptable document to serve as that SEDS alternative. And so those requirements are that the plan has to be current. So it has to be developed or updated within the past 5 years. And that's the case for the SEDS as well. It has to address EDA's regulations, which are in 13 CFR 303.7. And it's on that website, so you don't have to remember the exact regulations. But it must be consistent with our guidelines, which are also on the website. But the main sections that it has to cover is it has to have a summary background, an analysis, such as a SWOT analysis, a strategic direction or action plan, and an evaluation framework. And the last criteria is that it needs to clearly define the area that it's going to serve. So if that's a county, it would be the county boundaries. And it also has to provide evidence of a participatory process. So you have to show that the community was engaged in that strategic planning. And we do have recommendations for how to address opportunity zones in SEDS. And so we have 3 main recommendations that you can also find on our website. So the first is to include an inventory or a map of the opportunity zones in the region. So that's self-explanatory, just identifying those specific census blocks or tracts that are actually opportunity zones. And as Jake showed, there are lots of different maps out there that different agencies and organizations have developed. The second is to identify key partners and collaborators. So just to provide an overview of all the stakeholders that are involved with your opportunity zones. And that would be, public, private, the nonprofits, just those who are actively involved in your community and economic development strategizing and implementation. And the third is to really highlight and recognize linkages with other key elements of the SED. So like data points, goals, objectives, and priority projects. So for example, identifying any elements within your SWOT that you can particularly link to the opportunity zone and highlight. And so, of course, whether or not somebody addresses an opportunity zone in a SED, so that varies between the economic development districts and the regions. So some may not have it at all. I mean, if they don't have any opportunity zones in their region. Some may just have these three sections, but others might go much deeper if they really want to promote their opportunity zones and develop more of a regional prospectus on opportunity zones, like a whole separate document on it, where they go more into the competitive advantages, the community partnerships, and those projects that are really shovel ready for public and private investment. And we have a lot of different resources on our website to help you develop the SEDs, and even specific ones that relate just to the opportunity zones. And so this is really a way for the region to show potential investors that they think long-term, and that they're also thinking about their opportunity zones when they're thinking about that strategic planning. And so it's just an opportunity to market the area to those potential investors. And here I just have some data points on our investments in opportunity zones. Since 2018, we've invested $553.5 million in 395 projects. Of that, 173 is not directly in an opportunity zone, but it's nearby, or it supports a project that's in an opportunity zone. And here are the project examples of what we've funded. This is very similar to what you saw on that slide, where I had the different programs, the incubators, infrastructure, technical assistance, and those revolving loan funds. So we have actually, through the Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, that's what we fund the revolving loan funds through. We've helped capitalize over 500 funds, and that's almost $1 billion in capital. And I actually think that these numbers are probably higher, because I think this slide was developed about a year ago. But if you have interest in looking at identifying a revolving loan fund within your state, you can find that on this link that we have on the slide. And you can also go, if you want to look at revolving loan funds and opportunity zones, that's also available on a tool. It's Stats America. And I just want to point out too that these revolving loan funds have been a tool at the regional level to assist those businesses who have suffered from and who need access to capital because of the pandemic. And so the second bullet is just an example around for a revolving loan fund that we recently funded. So in July, through the EAA program, we gave an award to the Milwaukee Economic Development Corporation for $1.5 million, and they gave $1.5 million in match. But that increased the capital available for rural businesses in the area. And this is another project that I just wanted to provide an example of a non-revolving loan fund. So in 2019, we gave the Grand Portage Reservation Tribal Council the $3 million grant to help modernize a marina and the terminal's infrastructure. And so this is into increased demand for a ferry that they have. And so the council matched with an additional $2 million to also construct a new building for an educational area. And so that infrastructure that will also help drive private investment to the area. And the picture here just shows what the marina is going to look like. And I just wanted to end by talking about the economic development integration function. So I'm our economic development integrator, and each region has one. And so the idea behind the integrators is that we work with our regional partners and those at the local level. It's increased capacity to help them identify federal opportunities that align with their economic development projects and goals, and also to help form partnerships to where they have a direct connection to other programs if they have a specific question. And so there are 4 objectives on the screen for this function. Like I said, to increase access and capacity, to align resources, to streamline requirements, and to optimize those investments. And we have 2 tools in our box. So the first is a FIRE, what we refer to as a Federal Interagency Resource Exchange. And this is where we help those on the local level where if they have a project idea or if they really just have interest in a specific federal program, we kind of help them organize an information sharing event where you're just kind of making that partnership connection. You're just exchanging high-level information. And then we have what are known as our regional economic diversification summits, which I would describe as a step up from a REDS, where that's where you're going more in depth into a project where the community already has buy-in, the project's already identified in the SEDS, and there's an action plan for it. And, you know, of course, where they don't have the resources they need to implement that project. And so we work with the local partners to bring together everybody at the table, and we specifically bring value by bringing in our federal partners to really talk about the funding opportunities that are available and technical assistance opportunities that are available to help them catalyze those projects. And here's just our contact information. So for EDA, each state has what's called an economic development representative. Yours is Darren Fleener. His information is the one in the black there. I'm sure a lot of you know him, but he's a great resource, and he's your first line if you have a project that you think is eligible for EDA funding. And then my information is there as well. And so just feel free to contact me at any time if you just have questions about a particular project and resources that are available, or, you know, about opportunities and the resources that we have to help you develop your strategies around opportunities and EDA. Just please reach out. And I don't know if we have time for questions now, but available to answer some questions. Oh, and here's a slide with all of the links.
All right, thanks, Carlann. Does anyone have any immediate questions for her?
Hey, Carlann, it's Jake. Real quick, I just threw a link to that sprint challenge announcement that came out yesterday.
Yes, so we do have a sprint challenge. I think there's 25 million available. And it's similar to our build to scale programs. So I don't know if you're familiar with those, but this is specifically would be in response to CARES Act. So eligible entities would be like incubators and nonprofits, public-private partnerships. But yeah, that's a new program that was recently just released. That was released yesterday, I believe.
All right, great, thanks. So our closer today will be Brian McDonald. He's the District Director for Minnesota SBA and manages strategic efforts and daily operations of SBA's small business support throughout the state. He has served as the Deputy District Director since 2017. And prior to moving to Minnesota, he spent 5 years with SBA's Office for Entrepreneurial Development in Washington, D.C. Has additional experience with the President's Management Council as policy analyst at Health and Human Services, served in the Department of Treasury CDFI Fund, and private banking experience. He has an undergraduate degree from Syracuse University and a master's degree from Georgetown. So happy to welcome a fellow Hoya to our presentation here and wrap us up. So go ahead, Brian. Brian, I can't hear you right now.
Yeah, he's got a couple kids, I think. Maybe they're, who knows? Maybe they're.
Now it says he's connecting to audio.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah. There. No, still can't hear you. Could try calling him. Well, Brian takes a moment to figure out his audio. I guess I'll just do what I would have done at the end, remind people that we have one more webinar coming up that's scheduled for December 15th at 1:30. You can register for that at www.minopco.com/events. So we'll also mention that there will be a survey after this session ends, that goes out, seeking feedback on our offering. So please respond to that and share your opinion.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah.
It's Jake from HUD, and real quick, while we're seeing if Brian can get his technical issue ironed out, which is not abnormal these days. I've had the same thing happen. I just want to let everyone in the Twin Cities, the 7-county metro, know that back in August, the Met Council passed the or adopted.
Can you guys
the
hear me now?
There
Yep.
you go. Yep.
There you go.
All right, go ahead,
Carl,
Brian.
can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brian.
All right, that is very, very bizarre. I apologize about that. I'm gonna just share my screen. I had dialed in, so I don't know why the dial-in didn't work. It's one of those, sometimes you're so used to working at home, then when you're actually in the office, it becomes harder. So Carl, speak up if you can't hear me. I know we're close on the edge of time here, so what I wanted to do is just briefly share an overview of SBA programs and services before I drill into how our programs and services interact with opportunity zones, just for a little bit of context there. And then real quickly, I just wanted to share some of the efforts that we've done so far here in the Minnesota District Office. As Carl mentioned, we're here in the district office, so we're local here in Minnesota. So SBA was created in 1953. And primarily, we work with any type of small business. There's about 30 million small businesses in the US. So as long as you're defined as a small business, then we have some great programs and services to help you start, grow, expand, and recover. We're probably most famous for our SBA Finance, SBA-backed loans, our loan guarantee program. You can see here there's a variety of really beneficial uses, starting at $500 all the way up to over $5 million for our different variety of programs. We also have one of our best kept secrets, I believe, is the SBA Resource Partner Network. And I did see some familiar names on the participant list right now. I know one of our Women Business Center directors in the area is on the call, but the SBA Resource Partners provide confidential, no-cost technical assistance, and all of this will relate to opportunity zones. So I'll connect that dot in just a minute. And then probably pre-COVID, folks didn't really realize we had part of our mission is to help with disasters, and then of course we've been kind of at the tip of the spear since COVID for our COVID relief programs. But just wanted to share some of these resources and do a quick overview of SBA just to put opportunity zones in context. Yesterday, we were visiting in Duluth, and we were in an opportunity zone neighborhood in Lincoln Park. You can see in one of the pictures, our regional administrator, I was there, and also the Entrepreneur Fund, Northspan, and the Northland Foundation were hosting us to congratulate the Entrepreneur Fund for getting a competitive Prime Grant Award, which goes to low-income entrepreneurs. But I just thought it would be interesting just to see, you know, we're on the ground in an opportunity zone yesterday, in fact. I'm just going to skip right down to the very last bullet point that I know Jake mentioned. We have the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council. SBA is part of that, and I'll highlight, of course, our map is not to scale like Jake's, but I think we're familiar with that. So I'll share with you, Carl, our slides so folks can maybe look through a little bit in the future. But, you know, SBA is really, and I think just to highlight that we are in the mix for small business and operating funds for operating businesses as the use for opportunity zones. SBA, one of our priorities in the last couple of years has been an MOU with USDA and some of initiatives that we're calling Rural Strong and Elevating Rural. Now, I think the tie into opportunity zones, there's a lot of overlap there, and 40% of opportunity zones are in rural areas. So just wanted to highlight that that's an area of focus for our agency at SBA. So I'm going to kind of get into a little more detail here, but this is really the tools for small business starts and growth. Obviously, some financing, free and low-cost technical assistance, and then contracting and overlap with our hub zone certification programs. So this is kind of just the outline of how we fit into the federal puzzle with the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council. So we serve as the lead agency on the work stream under entrepreneurship. And then we're also a supporting agency with EDA in economic development. So we're supporting their efforts. And I just thought it was interesting to look at, and I know I'll send this slide deck out, but if folks are interested a little more, just kind of the strategic goals and how we fit into that puzzle. So as I was mentioning, access to capital is really critical, and probably what SBA is most known for is our SBA loan guarantee program. I'm just going to touch this slide and the next on kind of the overlaps with our loan programs and opportunity zones. Now, if anyone's interested in finding an SBA lender, our website, our district office website is sba.gov/MN. I have that on our last slide. But we list all of the Minnesota SBA lenders, and we have over 300 SBA lenders here in Minnesota. So we have one of the highest numbers, if not the highest, of SBA lenders in the country. But you can also use the SBA lender match tool and just kind of put in your location and find an SBA lender. Now, our 504 program provides small businesses with long-term fixed rate financing for such things as real estate, buildings, and machinery. Now, it's kind of the tie-in for opportunity zones is the relaxation for jobs created. So really, if your business is in an opportunity zone and you're pursuing 504, there's a little bit of extra incentive for a 504 deal to go through. For our Community Advantage program, so these are basically small up to $250,000 guarantee program. So it's kind of in that above a microloan, but below some of our other traditional financing. The Community Advantage loan program is typically administered by a CDFI, but you can see that SBA expanded the definition of underserved markets to opportunity zones. So Community Advantage lenders are required to make 60% of their deals in underserved markets. So it just kind of sweetens the pot for Community Advantage program. Also our 7A program, there are reduced fees. There were reduced fees for those who are in an opportunity zone. And so just wanted to highlight that. So in addition to our lending programs, kind of Jake did an outline of grants.gov and just the benefits of being in an opportunity zone. We've sweetened the pot on our competitions, such as we have an accelerator fund competition. So for those applicants who are located in an opportunity zone, they're going to be more competitive. We also had a one-time makerspace competition. And so again, if that makerspace is located in an opportunity zone, it's going to put them at the top of the list. We also have the SBIR program, and the Minnesota High Tech Association just was successful in getting those federal funds from SBA. So that's great to see the local dollars here. I think there's only 20 some across the country that got the SBIR Fast Grant Award from SBA. And so Minnesota was successful there. And then we also have grants for exporting. And so we give the STEP program to the state of Minnesota, and they administer this program for those who are interested in exporting. So I just wanted to quickly highlight some of those incentives. I mentioned contracting. And so we're seeing there's a pretty big overlap between hub zone and opportunity zones. Now the benefit is if you're hub zone certified, then you can compete. If you're a small business, you can compete for sole source contracts and set-asides from the federal government. So it's a great certification program to pursue. And if you're in an opportunity zone, there's obviously a lot of overlap there. We also have technical assistance programs that I mentioned. So such as SCORE. So those are volunteer mentors, the small business development centers, women business centers, and our veterans business outreach centers. So really just wanted to highlight really quickly some of the great resources that we have. Now, here at the local level, I feel that we're really here to try to foster and support related opportunity zone events. And of course, these pictures were prior to the pandemic. We did an event at First Avenue last year with HUD and the city of Minneapolis to really try to promote and support small businesses around the Upper Harbor Terminal in North Minneapolis, and to try to provide some resources there. So we kind of see that as our role, as helping bring together local partners to support small businesses. As a big project that might not otherwise happen is taking place because of opportunity zones. I think we can try to support related efforts so that small businesses and there's community wealth creation. So that was one example. And we also had a White House Opportunity Zone Summit scheduled in March, which unfortunately had to get canceled due to COVID, and North Span was going to be taking part in that as well. So unfortunately that was a casualty of the pandemic, but that's kind of the role that we see here at the local level. And so I'm happy to take any questions. Of course, feel free to follow us on social media and at SBA_Minnesota, and sign up for our great newsletters for those who are interested in training opportunities. Our team is pretty much doing a training every day since the pandemic started on COVID and other programs. So with that, Carl, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Brian. We're right up against 3 o'clock here. Does anyone have any questions for Brian or for any of our panelists? All right, well, I'm not hearing any, but I just want to again say thank you to all 4 of our panelists for their great presentations today. Thank you to everyone who attended. Great to see good attendance, and a lot of people who are interested in asking questions and trying to learn more. So it's great to have that, and we'll make sure that this session has been recorded, so it'll be on our website. People will be able to follow it again, and then we'll collect the PowerPoints too. So if you want any of those, we'll be able to share that information out and make sure we can get anyone's contact information who you may need. So thanks to everyone for attending today, and we will see you on our next webinar on December 15th.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone.